Hello, and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. On behalf of OTC Markets, we are very pleased you have joined us for the Small Cap Growth Conference. Our next presentation of the day is from Telo Genomics. Please note you may submit questions for the presenter in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings by clicking Book a Meeting in the top toolbar. At this point, I am very pleased to welcome Guido Bachler, Executive Chairman of Telo Genomics, which trades on the OTCQB venture market under the symbol TDSGF and on TSXV under the symbol TELO. Welcome back, Guido.
Thanks for having me back. I'm very excited to be here, and welcome. Good afternoon to all of you across the United States and Canada. I'm Guido Bachler. I am excited to share with you some of the updates. I was with you a few months ago, and we made a lot of progress. And so it's always exciting to come back and provide some more updates. As you know, you can ask questions. I will address them at the end. And as you just heard, there's also ability to schedule one-on-ones with me if you have additional questions. So moving along, I think the first point I do like to highlight, and for those of you who were with us few months ago, we spent a lot of time in 2025 refocusing the strategy of Telo Genomics. And one of the major steps we made really is to focus on the MRD. And MRD, you will hear through the presentation what it is and why it's so important. The most important part, I think, is really there's cancer therapies are applied very broadly. And it's really, really important that you know when you start a cancer therapy, which of the therapy is most successful for the patient, because not all of them, as you all know from maybe experience from your friends and families, that some work better and some don't work as well. So it's really important that when you start therapy, you have the best possible chance of actually treating the patients with the appropriate therapy. And that's where we're coming in place. So Telo has been showing in multiple myeloma specifically that we can actually help the physician to define which therapy. The next point really is then also, as you get through the therapy, as you can imagine, then your cancer burden is going down. So therapy starts being active, cancer burden is going down. And there's a very important time point when you have to actually decide, or the physician has to decide, am I going to stop therapy or am I going to continue therapy because I'm coming to a level below that is actually detectable. And that's really the key for minimal residue disease. This is a very, very crucial point of treatment of any cancers. And I'll be clear, we're focusing myeloma, but what we're going to tell you today is really applicable for pretty much any cancers. So we're going below a level, and that's really important because at that stage, you want to be sure you're going to stop therapy. You're not going to just, because you often delay. It's a late detection of relapse, right? The over/under treatment is really, really important. Need to know, and the uncertainty of the diagnosis, and again the cost of the drugs that can be given. So that part is important. And Telo Genomics has decided earlier this year to really 100% focus their energy on that MRD time point, because we're the only company who can not only count and enumerate the cancer burden, but we can predict and we can actually measure individual live cells with our technology and provide feedback to the ordering physician what to do next. And this is exciting. We don't have all the answers yet, but this is a really exciting story for us. And we made huge progress, and excited to share with you some more where we are with this. So again, coming back to why, and I appreciate many of you of our long-term investors being back here. We have spent lots of time, and that's also even before my time, clinically validating the risk of our platform, right? So we have now brought AI into the game. It's very important for us to be able to detect any possible cancer cells to increase our sensitivity. We are going to be a game changer in MRD. We also have a ClearCap certified lab, as many of you already know. We'll continue to move this forward. We're also thinking of expanding with a lab partner in the United States. And clearly the market that we're addressing is very, very significant. So again, why do we believe it will disrupt this MRD business, because we're not the only one, but nobody does what we're doing. And I think that's the key here. Again, we've worked on the technology for a long time. And I know some of you have been long-term investors, and we all appreciate you being patient with us, because we've come now to a point where we believe we have established the technology as a solid platform to truly have an impact in the clinical market, and also adding a lot more shareholder value for all of you. Again, we're clinically proven. What's important is we have a liquid biopsy platform. I'll talk about that as well, because it's important especially for when we talk about the minimal residual disease. And because when you're on cancer therapy, you should be monitored very frequently, so the patient and the physician can actually see where your cancer burden is, right? Is your cancer burden actually truly going down because of your therapy, or is it not? And you have to monitor this frequently. And today they're using bone marrow often in myeloma space to see how well the cancer burden progresses. But extracting bone marrow is very complex and painful for the patient, so it's not done very frequently. Switching to liquid biopsy, like we're doing, where you can do a quick blood draw, down the street in the draw centers, and do this every 3 to 6 months, completely changes the paradigm. So that is really important. And then again, us getting now into the AI, and we know we're not the only one talking about AI, but where we're applying it is really important, and I'll talk about that. And then again, focus on the MRT. So clearly, we are poised for significant changes going forward. So just a step back on, you have got now an idea about minimal residual disease, the key point, the strategy that we're moving forward, the validation of our technology, but how does our technology work and what is it? And for those of you who've been with us for a while, again, it's focused on the telomers. And Dr. Sabine May, who is the co-founder of the company, has been doing this for a long time. She's one of the world's leading experts in high-resolution microscopy. So she sees everything. I mean, it's amazing, the facility that she actually has in Winnipeg, where she actually can really see on the molecular level what's happening. And so she was the individual who really created the company, created the technology, and also created the software called Telo, who allows us actually to look at the telomeres of individual cells. And just as a reminder, the telomeres are the endpoints of the chromosomes. It's like the plastic piece around the shoe leash that holds it all together. And what happens if you have cancer, for example, those telomere structures starting to change. Some of them are actually merging together, and you see some pictures here. Left is a healthy cell, right is a disease cell where you see some clumps. And that's called genomic instability, and it shows you that actually something is going on with the genetic structure of the cells. They cannot duplicate well enough. They really get messed up. So very, very important. And we've shown this now across many publications, that we can actually very accurately and reproducibly show those specific points. So very exciting, and happy to provide you more. Also, to one of my points before, strongly de-risked platform. We have done many peer-reviewed publications. A lot of them were done by Dr. Sabine May out of Winnipeg. We have over 3,000 patients tested. We have also a lot of peer-reviewed publications, and we have very strong patent protection, which is really important as we now move more forward into the bigger world, as I call it, from the diagnostic point of view. The platform has now been used across, and you see a variety of cancers here, but that's not what we're focusing on. Clearly, we have a platform technology, and we're looking at lots of different verticals. And I'll talk about monetization of the business as well. And our main focus right now is multiple myeloma, and within the multiple myeloma is the MRD space. So who did we work with in the past? And I think that's important that we all realize is, we're working with extremely renowned clinical organizations in the United States and also in Canada. And I just came back from ASH conference. So it's the American Society of Hematology, which is the world's largest hematology conference for blood cancer. And I can tell you, we met with absolute leading institutions, including Cleveland, for example. And they're so excited about doing the work we're doing with them right now. So all I can share with you is the excitement of what we're having right now to really move this platform into the next phase, because we have phenomenal clinical institutions that want us to work with them, specifically in MRD, because we have something that nobody else has. So let's talk about biopsy. liquid biopsy for a moment. I mentioned that before as one of the key points. Again, standard biopsies is complex. It is also a risk for the patient. If you don't need to do this to get blood out the patient or to get information out of the patient to watch how well cancer therapy is actually working, you want to go to liquid biopsy. And so many of you heard that this is clearly a big deal for many cancer therapies. And so we are really in that space. Our technology has been proven as well to work extremely well. We can do either. We've shown comparison between liquid biopsy and bone marrow, for example. So we know we could do both, but absolutely the strategy is to focus on blood because it makes it much simpler. Your real-time monitoring, a very low cost, and the convenience for the patient is really important. Now let's talk about AI. AI is really important here, and again, as I mentioned, there's a lot of discussion on AI, and needless to say, anytime you look at the stock market, AI companies are driving everything up. So what are we at Telo Genomics doing with it? So part of our technology is to identify cancer cells. And what we're doing right now is we identify cancer cells with colored molecules. So we're adding color, we're staining the cancers, and then visually the pathologist actually evaluates those cancer cells based on colors. And so that's all fine, but it's not consistent. There's quite a bit of difference between what one pathologist may says versus another one in some areas. And so we're eliminating that uncertainty. And the work we've been doing together with Sabine's core lab as well as with Technion, which is the MIT from Israel, is really getting the AI tool that they developed out of their facility and using it in our tool. We already started working with them. And what it does, it looks at the structure of the cells. So it basically looks at a spectrum of the cells and then actually analyzes it. How does the cell actually look automatically? And of course, that can learn the tool going forward. But we've shown now already that AI tool can actually identify cells incredibly fast and incredibly reproducible, much better than a human ever can. So we're excited to bring this tool in because it makes up technology faster, simpler, and more robust and more sensitive. And that's important as you go through the minimal residual disease, where you want to have the best sensitivity to be able to count as many cells. So you want to make sure you can count as low as you can to give the physician the information how many cancers are actually still in the patient's blood. That's the key here. So again, we're very excited with that partnership, and we are able to announce soon some relationships with these guys on a broader level. Great. So let's MRD market here briefly. Very massive market, incredibly growing. For those of you not familiar, go look at Adaptive Biosciences. Adaptive Biosciences is currently the leader in the multiple myeloma MRD. This company has grown over 100%. It's incredible. But their technology is only counting, which is important, for example, their technology is only counting cells and not the profiling or risk assessment that we're doing going forward, which is really the most important part. So massive market. This MRD is pretty new. Only a few years ago, it was clearly identified by the FDA as a clinical endpoint, and now it's growing. So this is really blowing up, you guys. This is really something that we want to be part of it. And here, I believe, not because we cannot only enumerate, but we can clearly move forward into something new that the physicians don't get today by able to identify, the risk of the patients at the MRD level. So I want to talk a little bit more about how that actually works. So, and here's the slide. Apologize, a little bit busy, but what you see here, I want you to look at the clinical disease progression. And so here in the blue box, you see the blue line, a starting point when the patient is diagnosed. Of course, the cancer burden goes up because cancer is growing, and then you start hitting with therapy. And then what's happening in general, the cancer burden is coming down. You see that nicely coming down, but then at a certain time, the blue line is going back up or is slowing the progression. So those is the normal disease progression, multiple myeloma and other cancers. So I highlighted the MRD point, which is the first horizontal line that you see, and you want to make sure that goes as low as possible because you make sure you don't stop too early. But then you see the red dots along the linear line. We want to measure regularly. Right now they don't. They measure once and maybe every 6 or 12 months afterwards because of the complexity of having having to do liquid, cannot do liquid biopsy. It's really the bone marrow extraction. And then as you see, the disease is going up and you want to be able to measure that. So clearly for us, measure as sensitive as possible, measure monitoring frequently, and most importantly, being able to, at any time of our measurement, be able to say whether the cancer cell the patient has is actually still aggressive or not, change your therapy. And so clearly, nobody has all those bells and whistles in their toolbox except us, and that's what we're driving forward now. So again, I want to jump through here, major advantages of our technology. I want to make sure we got time for some other topics discussed, but this is key here, right? So we can absolutely blow the competitor out of the water with this kind of technology. We just need to get to the next level and do additional clinical trials, which I'm going to talk about here. So some of you know we've done trials before with Mayo on the smoldering and newly diagnosed myeloma. But when you see below, this is now all the things we're doing with MRD. So we started a McGill study last year, which unfortunately was pretty slow, but we're still progressing with them. Then we brought Cleveland on board, which we announced earlier this year. Works great. We met with the principal investigator actually on Sunday at ASH, and she's incredibly excited. She wants our technology to be used clinically in their lab because she doesn't like other technology. She uses also adaptive and has huge failures. She doesn't like the technology. She wants our technology, and so we're excited to work with that. But most importantly, we have now 3 partnerships initiated that we will announce over the coming months, weeks and months. And those are very, very renowned clinical programs. The Polish Foundation, for example, is partnership with University of Chicago. They have now multiple myeloma patient therapies over multiple years. So we have time point 0 when an MRD is taken, and then 1 or 3 years down the road. So now we can actually start showing with our technology that we can predict the outcome, and that's the holy grail. Similar with French. Again, also absolutely leading physicians. The French group is even connected with J&J, Janssen, so that's pharma partnership opportunities as well. And then also the Greek is phenomenal. These are all really incredibly planned and organized clinical trials. Will absolutely catapult us into a leadership role of MRD, not just for detecting, but really for profiling of the cells. So we're very, very excited, as you can imagine. And so we're moving on with those. And so again, maybe we want to go a step back, just close this out here. The important part really is that when you look at Telo Genomics right now, it's about having a well-established technology. We have a clear clinical plan in multiple myeloma MRD. And as you know, we have also other opportunities, which we as a company do not very heavy focus right now. And one of them, for example, is Alzheimer's. And here, it's also incredibly exciting. I mean, I've been in the industry for over 30 years. I have not seen many platform technologies that are as universal as what Telo Genomics has. But it also is a challenge that you want to focus on the right thing. And so from a vertical point of view, Telo is focusing on myeloma, but we also have now a partner in the US that we will announce soon. We actually just got the IRB approval for our first clinical trial with wellness and longevity and Alzheimer's included as well. So very exciting. When work that's been done by Dr. Sabine May out of Winnipeg, creating now and applying our technology to a simple buccal swab where you can actually measure and detect Alzheimer's at a very, very early stage. So needless to say, that alone is an incredible opportunity that we're looking for partners because we cannot do everything ourselves. And I think that's important to highlight as we move forward, right? Related to our business model. You know, how do we monetize this business? And I know I'm sure some questions will come. You know, the challenge of some of our stock values, but I'm a true believer that we're onto something very, very unique here. And the point really is that we have a platform with multiple verticals, and I think. Shown you before. Now, just a quick example of Alzheimer's. We've proven across that this technology works, right? So we're leading with MRD, as I mentioned before. We are constantly talking to partners, right? So we had great discussions as well at the ASH conference. So it's very fascinating about how people are starting to look at what we're actually doing, and the breakthrough will come with these additional clinical trials. We're talking about it before with the European US partners. And also, we're getting ready for a commercialization of this product also in the United States. And that's a pretty important part as we specifically talk about some of our milestones coming up. which gets me to almost the last slide. The quarterly milestones. It's important, and you know this deck is also uploaded on our website, which you can find at teldx.com. You know, we're initiating our MRD sites this year. That's the first plan, and I know it's December 9th, but believe me, we're driving this forward. We're also very close with the licensing discussion with the institution I mentioned before, and then the launch of the wellness activity. So these are key milestones that we're pushing through still by the end of the year. And then beginning next year, we start additional clinical trials, which is really important. We're also going to have a discussion with the FDA. It's important for us to understand what is required for the FDA to get to actually ultimately a product that is, you know, in guidelines and reimbursed and used in the United States. And of course, we also talk of continue further to do our MRD validation in our lab so we can start offering it to clinicians going forward. So there's a lot of activities, as you see, throughout the year, focusing again on MRD, executing those clinical trials, having discussions with reimbursement strategies. It's important as well that we understand exactly how we're going to price this MRD test in the United States, you know, and we're also considering thinking about moving to the US. You know, we have a site in Canada, but quite frankly, if you want to grow up in this business, you must have a site in the United States. And we're moving that very actively. And we're also thinking about ultimately, you know, an uplisting to NASDAQ. So that's the plan going forward. And we're putting a lot of these pieces in place right now to make this really a very, very successful 2026. On the cap and funding, I want to just preview that's also online. So we're clearly, you know, we're very disappointed with the share price. We will actively push this forward now as we have some key milestones in the plan, continue communication with it. And that's a key driver for us as well into 2026 to really focus. 25 was a lot of refocusing and organizational draft. So now we really need to move forward. We will focus much more on the market side as well. As many of you probably were disappointed where we are, so are we. So, but all I can promise you that we as a team and some of the changes we're planning to make and will make, will definitely, we see that will have an impact going forward. So with that, I close out, and I would suggest that we're heading over to the Q&A. And I want to go right from the beginning. So there was a question about what are your thoughts on Natera's acquisition of Foresight Diagnostics? The first question that came in, I think that's it's. I mean, clearly there is activities going on. I'm actually very excited about what's happening in the M&A world for diagnostics. As you can imagine, you all probably familiar with Abbott Diagnostics acquiring Exact for $23 billion, biggest diagnostic merger ever. It's good for industry. So I'm very excited about what's going on here. You know, we watch what's going on, and we absolutely see that we have, you know, something very unique that ultimately, you know, for us as well, we're hoping to license some of our technology as well to some of those partners and potentially ultimately some M&A discussions as well. So great question. Something else here. Go here. You are collaborating with Cleveland Clinic and McGill and trials. What are the explicit commercial rights or framework around these relationships, and how do you see them converting into test volume or pharma contracts? So great question. Quite frankly, McGill is too slow. Be very transparent. That's why we're moving forward with retrospective cohorts. Prospective cohorts always take a while. You know, not all patients want to participate in clinical trials. So that's why we switched to the 3 trials. One is the Greek, the French, and the Polish together with University of Chicago. Those are the clinical trials that will catapult us forward because they're faster, right? You can, at that time, some of these publications, some of these clinical trials have already been published with our technology. Now we're coming in and we're comparing our technology to Adaptive's technology, for example, and other, which is another flow technology that's been used in Europe more than the US. So we're going to come up with competitive data with endpoints where we can actually show that we cannot even count, but we can actually profile and predict the risk and the relapse of a patient, and nobody else has this. So this is going to move us, and more than the Cleveland and McGill. But Cleveland could be our first potential commercial partner because they love what we do, and we want to continue with them going forward. So it could help there as well. Next one was the abstract suggests a strong blood marrow concordance for your liquid biopsy MRD approach. What thresholds or performance metrics do you need to hit in larger cohorts to make blood-only monitoring a new standard? So that is a great question. And quite frankly, we are not going to drive the switch to blood. The industry and the physicians are. On the myeloma, there's global myeloma conferences, and they're moving. They want to move to blood because they don't like that they can monitor on a regular point. So clearly for us, moving into blood is key. And one of the points that's important is how sensitive you are. We know for some other, because when you measure bone marrow, you're right in a core, right? You're in the heart of the disease. Where you measure blood, you're going to measure cancer cells that are actually converting into blood cells, and you measure that. And the sensitivity of those cancer cells is really key. And we are also here, we measure 1 in 10 million, which is tenfold better than some of the competitors. So we're absolutely in there, working together with the clinical guideline groups to make that the reality. This is key. So this is going to come, and we're right there with them. Great. One more question here. As more AI-driven diagnostics tools come to market, what performance or usability benchmarks are you setting internally to ensure your AI components is true differentiator and not just a marketing label? I love that question. I wouldn't use AI if it's not real, because everybody's using AI. I mean, you can talk to anybody. Everybody just adds an AI sticker to it. But so it's really an AI machine learning here as well, right? So it's about being able to identify these individual cells, from millions of other cells with the right structure. And I think that's where the uniqueness comes in. And the research has been going on for a long time between, again, the Israeli MIT group as well as the Sabines group. And so they have great work. And so we're focusing very heavily. We want to make sure we can tie this IP around us as well. But there might be other ones, but we haven't seen anybody else yet in focus in that area. But speed is not, at times, not our friend. So we need to speed this up. That's why we as a team want to very aggressively move forward and make this a clear kind of new standard for the pathology part, right? That's really critical here. Next one, how do you technically distinguish viable tumor cells from background cells and cell-free DNA? And what is the false positive rate when classifying aggressive cells? So here this gets quite technical, but I'm happy to talk about it, because when you look at cell-free DNA, you don't know. This is sequencing technologies. You generally don't know whether the cell is alive or not. You don't, okay? You multiply it sometimes with molecular technologies. We don't do this. We measure active cells, right? So we measure the cells are not alive, but we measure actually the true DNA structure, because we're looking at biology. And when you talk to some of the experts like Ken Anderson, who is the Pope of multiple myeloma, he said, Guido and Sabine, you guys should focus on that, because you're the only technology who actually looks at live cells, and you can look at true biology compared to everybody else. I think that's very important. And so for us, we have less a false positive issue, because we don't multiply. We're looking at true real cells. And now if you even add AI into it, there's any false positive is extremely low, but we also very transparent. We do not have all those numbers yet, right? We're working on that, but it's a great question. So next question, you mentioned NASDAQ merger or uplist in Q4. Is this dependent on hitting clinical revenue milestones? What is the financing assumption? I can't go into too many details on that. We're certainly talking about it internally. My belief is it has to have heavily hitting on clinical results, right? It's important, but we feel very comfortable with that. So it is something we as an organization need to think about it moving forward, because we can't keep doing what we're doing. And the ASH conference showed that we've been doing a lot of things on a shoestring. We need to think differently to truly move this company into a value proposition that is meaningful, what it means for all of us. So we are very actively thinking about how we're going to actually make this happen, and we'll keep you guys all in the loop. One point, for example, is the consideration of partnering with a lab or building a lab in the United States. And I built two or three clear labs in the past. I understand how it takes, but the most important is not just necessarily having a lab, but understanding the reimbursement of your test. And that is probably something we will start working as well, as we now have more and more clinical information. I know I'm almost running out of time. I think I know my questions will be soon blacked out here, but it's there's a lot of great questions here. I wish we could go on. So again, I want to remind everybody, please schedule one-on-ones in the coming weeks and whatever. We're available. So let's find a time if you want to talk more. We want to make sure we're able to address all the questions. So the next one here was the MRD market is 2.5 billion today, growing to 4.5, but market share target within 5 years. That is a great question, you know, and how will you compete against well-funded players like Adaptive? And that's why I'm saying we need to find, you know, we need to think bigger as an organization, because we all together as shareholders should think about that way, because we have a massive opportunity ahead of us. That doesn't come very often. And I've been with Telo for a while, and I've been really pushing this MRD, and now we're really getting there, having a major impact. We need to find partners, right? We don't want to, if you build a lab in the US, we need to partner with LabCorp and Quest and bigger organizations to get the reach into the market. We can't do this ourselves. We're not going to hire hundreds of sales reps. I don't think that's the right approach. So we clearly have some good ideas how to drive this forward. And I think that's key. And again, the market share of ours will have to determine that. That's not something I can give you a number yet. But even if it's even if you only have 1% or 5% of the market share over the next, you know, coming in the next 2-3 years, it's a massive market opportunity for us. And I hope we can all do this together. Let me quickly go to the next one. You plan to file for FDA breakthrough Q4 26. What specific clinical data points? So here, one of the data points from our clinical trials, the Greek, the French, and the Polish, whichever is done first, will be used in discussions with the FDA. It's important to understand that. But to be transparent, we're still discussing exactly what path we need to go in the US. There's an FDA approval path, and there's also a laboratory developed test path you can go forward, where you would need to do an FDA approval. And so we're as a team assessing all the details about what's the right approach going forward here. Let me see real quick here. Let me chat. All right. Okay. I'm being given the sign I have to wrap up. So appreciate everybody being on board here. Thanks again for your time. And I hope I'll talk to some of you soon in the upcoming one-on-ones. Thank you.